But I am surprised by this trend line of we're going to go take down the primes. I'm like, that seems like a horrible target.
It is considered the next space race, essentially, and America has to lead. We have to dominate.
I'll just say welcome, Aaron, to the Goat Rodeo podcast. I am regular host Garrett Smith, alongside regular co-hosts Simon and Dave. We're all from a little company called Reveal that is on the front lines of reinventing how the warrior class engages with technology in the 21st century, given all the geopolitical and economic demands on that establishment. And we talk about everything between geopolitics, the defense tech revolution, venture capital, and everything going on between all of those layers. But Dave, over to you. I'm going to mic toss and see what you can extract out of Aaron Flint.
So, Aaron, as Garrett said, I'm super happy to have another Army guy here. My deep background, I was an active duty Army infantry officer, and then I've spent the last 10 years in the National Guard. And I think that you spent some Guard or some reserve times as well. And I'm looking at your shadow box and your wall behind you. The Marine Beret, the CIB. Can you give us a little bit about what your military background was?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'll joke. I should have went and grabbed my bottle of Devil's Brigade whiskey from Willie's Distillery back here in Ennis, Montana, because I'll often joke I was lucky enough to have served in a Special Forces unit, but I'm not a Green Beret. I just drink their whiskey. That's what I tell everybody. I'm not a Green Beret. I just drink their whiskey because, of course, Willie Blazer's an incredible Army Ranger. Green Beret, who started this incredible distillery. But yeah, I joined after 9/11. I kind of like Simon, man. I was working on Capitol Hill and I was a young staffer. I was doing energy policy at 20 years old for a United States Senator from Montana. And I was going to Howard University back in Washington, D.C. I was waiting tables 5 nights a week to pay for going to college back in D.C. And then when 9/11 happened, that's what made me kind of get back to Montana and get back into my career path of broadcasting, but also join the military. I was one of those guys. I always thought, like, man, I don't want somebody telling me what to do all day long. I want to go out into broadcasting, and I always had great respect for the military, but I never thought I would join myself. And then 9/11 happened, and it's like, okay, we got to do something about what just happened to our country. And so I'd always planned on being, National Guard and then eventually Army Reserve, because I wanted to do my day job, what I've always wanted to do, broadcasting. But I also wanted the honor and the opportunity to get to serve our country. So the National Guard was a great fit for me. Started in the infantry, enlisted, went straight through basic and AIT and got my blue cord less than a year before the first 9/11 anniversary, and then went straight into ROTC and then got the blue cord again as an infantry officer, and a couple years with the infantry, and then I got pulled into some special operations assignments, luckily as well. Just incredible.
Very, very cool. Well, in the active duty days of GWAT, again, post 9/11 with similar motivations you had, there was always a bit of an active duty like chip on the shoulder about the Guard. But then when I transitioned to the Guard, I realized that the op tempo of Compo 2 and Compo 3, they were actually doing the lion's share of the actual work. So I assume those years you probably deployed to all of the hotspots, or at least many of them. I mean, the Iraqs, Afghanistans, Jordans, Africa.
OA.
Yeah. 20 years ago, I was coming back from Ramadi, Iraq, and Garrett and Simon, our two Marines on this one. The Marines had one side of the river in Ramadi, and we had the other, and we had our AO, we had our battle space, and we were out there every single day. So we loved working with the Marines. I mean, we had their Anglico teams would roll out with us eventually almost on a near daily basis, K9 teams, some of their other SIGINT capabilities and things like that, and air support, obviously. So no, it was just incredible. In fact, a lot of our guys from that deployment will wear that 2 MARDIV combat patch on our right shoulder. And then some Marines will catch it and they'll say, "We're Marines, we don't wear patches." And it's like, well, we got the letter from the general. It's authorized. But no, it was an incredible honor to be there with the Marines in Ramadi, Iraq, which was just a crazy place, of course, 20 years ago. And got to serve with some mountain infantry guys out of Vermont, the Green Mountain Boys out of Vermont, a lot of guys out of the New England area. Actually, Navy SEALs like Jocko and Chris Kyle were in the same AO
out there.
Yep. Back then. And then some incredible soldiers, some mech infantry soldiers out of Pennsylvania. And just an incredible assignment to be a brand new butter bar lieutenant and to get the honor to serve with some of the most incredible men like that. Man, it's crazy.
My brother was right across the river from you in Ramadi that year, as part of the reconnaissance element attached to, I forget which task force it was, kind of like the headquarters unit over there in Ramadi, but he would have been right across the river from you.
Regarding the patches, that is the one terrain that I'll let these Marines have, is they do have objectively better uniforms and better uniform standards than the Army does. I like the fact that it's name Marines and how well you like what your marksmanship score is.
The names was a big drama back in the day. We didn't put our names on for a very long time. This was a big fight.
Yeah,
there's a joke there that's not appropriate for the podcast.
I don't know. The production crew, the producers could probably bleep it out if necessary. Come on, Dave.
Just a hard cut from us doing one thing to another, and some text that says for legal purposes.
Maybe to bring us a little bit back on topic and to save Dave from having to utter something he would prefer not to utter. Willie's Distillery and the Devil's Brigade whiskey that they distill there out in Ennis, Montana. It's a reference to, or distilled in recognition of, the 1st Special Service Force, which was the heritage kind of old guard first ever special operations unit, stood up in kind of the earlier days of the United States involvement in World War II. And it was a combined U.S.-Canada outfit, 60% American and 40% Canadian. And it was stood up and headquartered at Fort Harrison here in Montana, in Helena, or just outside of Helena. It's interesting that they distill and mix that whiskey with 60% American whiskey and 40% Canadian, which again pays homage to the Devil's Brigade, so-called, for their exploits in Italy and elsewhere. So I love the Montana heritage there, Aaron, and we'll see how the race goes, but love the national representation that our state gets.
Yeah, it's incredible. You talk with any special operations forces, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines that are serving in special operations, and they all trace their lineage back to that 1st Special Service Force. And so, of course, here in Montana, we've got the Devil's Brigade chapter of the Special Forces Association, which is just a remarkable group of guys, and they provide incredible support to the active duty force still out there right now as we speak.
I don't know how hard a transition this will be, but I think you're on the record as describing the current state of competition and development in the AI and quantum fields, and probably many others, as kind of a new space race. So last week we interviewed, or had on the podcast, a guy named Dmitry Alperovich, who was a co-founder at a very successful cybersecurity company called CrowdStrike. And he's written a number of books and is kind of out front on beating the drum on the idea that we're actually in a second Cold War right now, whether we admit it, whether we to ourselves or not, whether we use that term or not. The nature of the competition amongst these geostrategic, something between competitors to adversaries in Russia and China, it is the kind of 21st century task for the United States and the rest of the West. So can you talk to us maybe a little bit more about maybe your perspectives on technology, kind of the technology race around critical technologies like AI, quantum, but in our world, we care a lot about stuff that's deployable all the way down to the line infantryman. So think like mobile devices, drones, counter-drone stuff, one-way attack drone stuff, all the stuff that we're seeing in places like Iran, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, and the kind of the looming specter of a Taiwan-China showdown. What's your perspective generally on the state of affairs with national security and technology?
Well, let's go back to the ground level, the individual soldier. We were talking about Ramadi, Iraq 20 years ago. One thing our unit did very well was detainee operations, and we really tried to do well at SSE, sensitive site exploitation, because, hey, we had our battle space. We're out there every single day. Sometimes the high-value the target packages, they would just give them to us because we were out in our sector every single day. We're always roving through the neighborhoods. And so when we kick in a door, taking a detainee, we knew that we needed good SSE, and we needed to put a good packet together to hopefully prosecute and detain the guy that we just, nabbed off the streets, right? And so that's where I first really got interested in this whole concept of SSE. It's just an everyday infantry guy. And then you fast forward how I got into special operations. My first assignment in special operations, oddly enough, was basically our unit was responsible for doing SSE. exploitation, forensic evidence exploitation, whatever you want to describe it. And so from a technology standpoint, that's why I love what you guys are doing at Reveal Technology, and taking all these tools that maybe before, and tell me if stop me if I'm saying anything I shouldn't be saying, but
no, keep praising us on our podcast, please.
I think about it. We were wearing backpacks full of gear and carrying, cases full of other gear that now guys like you can put into the palm of our hand or in a smaller piece of whatever, right? And so that's what you guys are doing for the individual, the soldier level, as I understand it, which is incredible. So as a veteran myself, somebody who retired after over 20 years in the military, we want to make sure that our troops, like you say, have the latest, greatest technology, not only to save lives, but to also, once we've captured one terrorist, how do we find the next, right? And how do we find out who their buddies are? But just as an everyday Montana guy, what I'm so excited about with this space is, you go to Bozeman, Montana, you go to Montana State University, and I'm a University of Montana guy, and there's some good tech companies in the Missoula area too, don't get me wrong, but when you look at
just lost the Missoula vote. Sorry, Aaron.
yeah. Well, my opponent's a Grizz guy too, so I've got more Bobcat friends. We'll stay with that. But just as an everyday Montana guy, first off, as a veteran, I see these veteran entrepreneurs as just incredibly inspirational, because these men and women are not only creating these incredible businesses, but they're hiring fellow veterans and they're succeeding. And most fellow veterans that I talk to are people that are coming off of active duty. What do they want more than anything else? They want a job. They want financial security. They want an opportunity to provide for themselves and their families. And oh, by the way, then they want to go out hunting and fishing on the weekends as well. And you get to do all that right here. And so, but even just as an everyday Montanan, this is incredibly important. I mean, I had a top secret security clearance in the military, worked a little bit in the counter weapons of mass destruction piece. And so you understand how important cyber and data is, not just to American economic security, but to national security as well. And we cannot allow the Russians and the Chinese to lead in that space. America has to lead. America has to dominate. It's so much like American energy security as well. America has to lead. We have to dominate when it comes to energy security, cybersecurity, data security, you name it. And heck, right down the hall from you guys there at Reveal Technology, you've got the Quantum Computing Alliance, and researchers through MSU are helping to lead in this very category. It is considered the next space race, essentially, and America has to lead. We have to dominate.
I think the quantum thing's really interesting, and for those that are tracking the story, there were some down pilots after Epic Fury, and one of them, I don't know if this is famous yet, but it's officially reported. This is not like top secret Simon news, but they used a quantum sensor to find this guy's heartbeat in the desert, which is beyond the capacity of my brain to understand how something like that works. But it's the first time that I've heard of so far where we're talking about like products coming out of the quantum industry that are going to go into everyday life application, right? Like real, like I've been staring at $4 million quantum computers in dozens of towns for long enough to be like, okay, this is cool. I obviously know this is like an interesting next frontier, but I'm also like, how do you use this? Where does this go? And I think it's going to be really wild to live through this over the next 10 years and see the actual like technology spin outs that have that technology. And further, and this is a thing that like I think matters a lot to us, is we talk a lot about China and Russia and what they're doing in, various domestic and military competitive spaces, but you never hear about Russian or Chinese infantry tech. And I think about this all the time when people talk about like, oh, well, if they have to fight a near peer, I'm like, they're going to have to stay home. And we're going to I always have a hard time envisioning it because I'm like, we'll have to invade because they don't know how to get to us. And if they do, what NCOs are they going to send? And I'm like, I've long believed this, and I think it's still going that direction. The NCO is the competitive advantage of the United States military. Full stop. Like having that backbone core and having been building it for so long. And you see it in Ukraine. And there's like good data out of Ukraine that like you got two good things. You have like the national mobilization, everybody's on the same page, but also you have an NCO concept of operations that allows NCOs to adapt and change to like the face of combat as it's happening, instead of like Russian conscripts that are like, how do I get out of this trench? Like there's a pride and service that really is a force multiplier for this tech stuff. And I think that's an interesting aspect of all of it.
I agree. I strongly agree with Simon there, because there's not a single NCO that I've ever met in the United States military that would allow the entire like brigade's attack, like ground attack, to be held up, by the enemy trenching the road, waiting on the orders from the general. Right? Like
no way.
there is just something that fundamentally would not happen in the United States military, thanks to our wildly professional, empowered non-commissioned officers corps. What do you say, Garrett?
Yeah, I mean, no, I was good. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to riff on the idea that like that is a key differentiator between the United States and pretty much the rest of the world. A lot of Western allies and partners have a similar concept with decentralizing decision-making authority and the impetus for action down to non-commissioned officers and decentralized folks. And like that is what our company cares about. We care about that persona that's living out in the, in the thick of the fog of war, near the tactical edge, and has to make good decisions under duress. And they don't have time to be, waiting for the direct order to come down from, Lieutenant Colonel Smith or Lieutenant Colonel Flint. We're going to be way back in the rear, or Lieutenant Colonel Caudle for that matter.
And we also recognize that we've empowered those folks, those non-commissioned officers and junior leaders, to the extent that they are now in control of a massive amount of stuff, and data and information flow. Like you've got non-commissioned officers that are employing ISR and strike robotic systems. They are monitoring 3 or 4 different sensing modalities, and they're trying to make sense of all that. And at the same time, they don't have a staff of lieutenants running around with map markers telling them how to make sense of it.
And that sensitive site example that you brought up, Aaron, really had me thinking about that, which is like that GWAT era is kind of the first wave of really burdening that lowest level infantryman with tech and like responsibilities beyond, fire and maneuver. And when I was in, and again, I'm sure you remember this, we have a phrase in the Marine Corps that every Marine's a rifleman, and we bastardized it during the GWAT to be like, every Marine's a collector now too. Because they realized at a certain point that like the Marines were just destroying the house. Like, actually, we need stuff out of the house. You gotta pick up some stuff. You can't. This is a different type of fight, and so like it really required. We got into the concept of the strategic corporal, and like we already have this immense talent pool that really is where the action's happening, and it's accelerating so fast. And I had a conversation about this just yesterday, and like ManNet radios and like GoTennas in Afghanistan 15 years ago, it was just like, I just need to be able to talk, figure out how to get me to talk to these mountains. And if you go right now, I have to be able to talk, do location. I'd love to do video. I need all of these different devices to sync. And by the way, the troops are just going to have to do it. There's not going to be any support there to like also, so like we have to build a resilient version of this that the troops can administer. And it kicks my brain back to GWAT, and it kicks my brain back to SSE and also IEDs. And Aaron, I'm interested to know like sort of your opinion on this, because the IED threat really loomed large in the GWAT, and I think it's still in like the memory of everyone. But there was what I would consider very myopic bureaucratic response to IEDs. Robert Gates famously built new offices at the DoD, and the MRAP came out of this, and we had these huge like whole of government pivots to the body armor and up armor and Humvees, and like, holy crap, how do we move faster? And none of those systems, in my opinion, were sustainable. They were built to do one thing, and then they just became like bureaucratic layer that's just stuck there that never learned how to do anything else. And so I think like we somewhere between the infantrymen and the Pentagon, we lost the plot of like, what makes this great is that these guys can make their own decisions and continue to adapt. And why does that never seem to filter up? I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are, like having experienced some of the IED threat, and how you think that could inform how we equip the military for whatever the next war is. We're not going to pick. I think a lot of us assume it's drones, but we don't know.
Yeah. One quick thing I wanted to say, though, going back to all the commentary about technology and Ukraine and everything going on all over the world, is that because many of us right here, we're all tired of forever wars, right? And the repeated deployments that have just burned out a lot of troops and everything. And, the nation building exercises that we saw in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And I wanted to make the point that when we talk about this type of defense technology, that it's not just technology that we need just for when we're in the middle of a wartime situation. I believe in peace through strength that prevents wars, that stops wars from breaking out. And when we have superior technology in the hands of our operators and in the hands of our troops, that to me is a key part of peace through strength to end these wars and to get us out of these wars, but also to prevent these wars. And I think too often there's people that operate in the defense technology space that think, oh, well, we need to have. They think they need to have these forever wars going on in order to be able to sell their product or to maintain their job. And it's like, no. Peace through strength means a strong military, which means strong technological base in order to deter and prevent and end wars as well. So I just want to make that point. Garrett, Dave, Simon, I don't know if you have comments on that before I get back to Simon's point about the IE.
I mean, we talk about that all the time. I'm a proponent of, and I think our company we are all proponents of this notion of deterrence is the ideal, and the only way to deter the next war is to prepare to win the next war. Right. And so that is strength, right? That is a form of national strength. And much of it is technology. We certainly have that opinion. We think that technology is part of the solution there, but it isn't just that. There's national will. There's the quality of the recruiting base. There's leadership. There's all kinds of stuff baked into there, and it's strength in our economy, which allows us to throw non-military weight around the world in diplomacy and economics. And so we're big proponents of that concept, Aaron. Absolutely.
And then from a government efficiency standpoint, I think that was part of Simon's question as well here. I certainly saw that, doing SSE and exploitation. We had a certain amount of exploiting evidence that came off of IEDs in particular, but you've seen this in government, you see this in the military, sometimes corporate bureaucracies see this as well. You get these folks that come in and now they want to create this large, big bureaucracy so they can have some big fancy title and run some big program, when in reality, 4 soldiers or 4 good Marines could actually get the job done and save the government tens of millions of dollars in resources and personnel. But you do get that mission creep from some folks in government and in corporate bureaucracies. Well, oh no, I have to create a bigger organization so that I can have a fancier title or a higher rank or a higher GS rating and waste, millions of dollars in the process. When oftentimes our troops with the right technology can get that job done at a much more nimble basis.
And so and this is a little bit of a touchy topic because I know that I am in the very small minority of our space about the defense budget. But sometimes I see folks, particularly at senior Pentagon level, who recognize that they can't move the bureaucracy fast enough. And this is what I think happened to Gates, right? I think Gates had extremely good intentions and knew what he wanted to do and found that the system was not built to solve the problem at the speed that he was expecting. So he built a sledgehammer and just brought it down on this problem to make sure that these folks were protected from IEDs. Unfortunately, that I think creates a worse systemic pressure. Right now, you just added a bunch of layers that will outlive you, and then have now outlived the IED problem. Right, like the RICTO and all those things still exist, and there's no IEDs for the RICTO to build MRAPs for. And clearly, they're not solving the counter drone problem. And so, I wonder if it almost brings me back to DOGE. There's a priority problem here. It's not even just the better devils or the better angels of I need to build a place or I need to do kingdom building. It's just that the hard work of breaking this down and reducing the budget in some places, I think. Where as long as there is an infinitely growing top line, why would I get any better at managing my money? I'm going to go build a new place for me to spend my money that lets me move as fast as I want to go. And I think it's easy for us to get addicted to that in the defense space because the stakes are so high and the consequences are so dire. But I worry that all the tools are already there. You already have the troops. They know what to do. They know what they need to solve their problems. You just need to empower and resource them. You shouldn't do new resources. You should go rob the programs that aren't performing. Like, kill them. Remove these things. I'm sorry, there was no question on that. That was pure Simon.
That was pure Simon sentiment.
I'm just out here complaining.
So I remember, Aaron, you'll remember this from your early days in the Army. You and I both enlisted before becoming officers, and I remember being a junior enlisted rifleman, hungry to make decisions, hungry for resourcing, knowing that I and my fire team or I and my squad could go and solve anything. Break down barriers, break down walls, find the bad guys, do the job. If only, if only the higher ups would just leave us alone, give us what we need, leave us alone. And I'm not saying that is what we should, resource, and that's how we should like lead every conflict at the fire team level. But there is something to it, right? Like, I remember feeling like sometimes the policy was constraining my ability to do the job they asked me to do. And so later, when I went to officer candidate school, my wife sent me to officer candidate school. She understood that an officer's retirement was slightly better than an enlisted retirement. Sorry, it's the straight truth. And somehow they let me into OCS. So anyway, later when I became an officer and I was actually like leading significant echelons of Marines, everything from platoon to company up to O5 commands in the staff functions, I tried to like channel that energy. In other words, empower, issue intent. This is what we're trying to do, fellas. Here's the goal. I'm not the expert. You are the subject matter expert in your tactical craft. Go and do what you need to do, solve those problems, tell me what resourcing you need. And otherwise, I'm just going to stay out of your way and ensure that the higher up, shit rolling down the hill doesn't roll all the way to you. And I'm going to catch that. And anyway, your comments earlier about the transition from enlisted to officer ranks and kind of like what leadership looks like in those tactical echelons, that was resonating in my mind as we're talking about decentralizing authority and also decentralizing and empowering with technology.
It's so analogous to what we see happening in our economy and in our country across the board. When Simon was talking about the backbone of the military, your sergeants, your chiefs, your NCOs, that's how I think of businesses and entrepreneurs, small business in particular, the backbone of our economy. And yet, how many times are they just simply asking to be allowed to get the job done, to make things more affordable for America? A big part of my campaign for Congress is making the Montana dream affordable again. So as I meet with so many of these, whether it's home builders, whether it's folks in the construction industry, whether it's trades union folks, that want to see more trades education. Just a big thing that we're pushing is trades and trades education. My question to a lot of these folks is, what are you not allowed to do? What do we simply need to be allowed to do in America of all places so that we can get America up and running, so that we can bring housing prices down, so we can bring energy prices down? What do we need to be allowed to do? And part of that stems back from all the COVID craziness. As you guys know, there's an exception to policy for almost everything in the military, right? And so what do we need to be allowed to do?
Even tattoos, Simon. Even tattoos, Simon.
Yeah. Allow guys with tattoos to serve, right? Something as silly as that. Yeah.
I do want to quickly say that we need less tattoos. They have ruined my thing. They did it wrong. They all look stupid, and it was cooler when it was less of us. I am all for eliminating tattoo acceptance in the workplace. If someone tells me to wear long sleeves, I'm putting them on because it makes it cooler.
I just
Simon, if you legalize everything, nothing is fun anymore.
So Simon, you interrupted Aaron's important rant on reducing house, home affordability, issues. So Aaron, back at it.
I'm a true constituent. I'm derailing to talk about something that doesn't matter at all and that only matters to me and no one else in the room. That's what it's all about.
It's Richmond.
I remember I was on the radio during the crazy COVID years, and lady Nancy in Roundup, a great caller into the show, she called in one day. She said, "I'm starting to see this word allow too much. We aren't allowed to do this, or we need to be allowed to do that." And that always stood with me, because even out now that the COVID craziness is supposedly behind us, we still hear this word allow a little too much in the United States of America. And I say that to say, since I had the honor of serving in some special forces units, I'd get to listen in on these really smart Green Beret, sergeants and officers. And I remember when the JAG lawyer would come in And they'd be like, okay, is this a good JAG or is this a bad JAG? Is he a good lawyer or is he a bad lawyer? Well, you guys know a bad lawyer would just say no to everything. Nope, can't do that. Can't do this. Can't do that. A good lawyer would say, well, here's how we can do it. Here's what we got to do. Or here's what we got to do. And I'll butcher the Spanish phrase, but I was talking with a Cuban American guy, and he said the Cuban Americans have a phrase for this too, which is "Ya tengo un no, muéstrame un sí." Something, and I know I butchered the Spanish there for any of you Spanish speakers out there, but basically it says, I already have a no, show me a yes. And whether we're talking defense technology and getting these tools in the hands of our soldiers, or making the Montana dream affordable again with lower housing prices and lower energy prices and higher wage jobs, so often it's like, we've already got a no from our federal government. Show me a yes from our federal government so we can get this country dominating again.
In the modern world of hypercritical online public forum, the Marines also have a saying that it's better to seek forgiveness than ask permission. And it's a catchphrase, but I also think there's like an important kernel of truth, which is, how much do you care about this thing? Do you care about it enough to weigh the consequences? And you actually are capable of making that decision for yourself, which is like, yeah, if I win though, you're all going to be very happy I did this. And if I don't, I can tolerate the consequence of like what failure looks like here. And so I've always thought, it's a funny phrase, but there's just some real truth to it. Like, this will be okay. I say in the Marine Corps all the time, we can do fire me. I doubt you're not sending me home. Let's do this. We'll figure
home
it
to
out.
Montana. Don't threaten me with a good thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Well, Aaron, congratulations. I think you locked down the Cuban-American Montana vote. Amazing. I think you got it.
Yeah.
I think you got it. Let's pivot into maybe a last topic, and we can use this as a jumping off point for any number of things, but let's talk about a couple of key venture trends in the defense technology space. I'm going to talk maybe 3 or 4 of these, and feel free to key off these if you'd like and comment. But the first is that there is an obvious capital concentration in autonomous systems. So venture capital is getting deployed into lots of different technology offerings in the innovation space, but about 84% of total capital deployed so far in 2026 has gone to companies that are building autonomy stacks, hardware, software, and everything in between. And it's talking specifically about platforms that are integrating autonomy software with physical hardware. So this is kind of the AI hardware or the autonomy hardware play across domains. So we're talking about unmanned surface vessels for maritime dominance, aerial vehicles, obviously, autonomous flight controllers, drone swarms, and the software that runs and maintains all that stuff. So interestingly, 84% of all venture capital deployed in 2026, which is in the many billions of dollars at this point, is concentrated in autonomy and autonomy systems and platforms. The second trend is the rise of prime challengers. So the legacy prime contractor set in the United States has for many decades, through and to the end of the Cold War and beyond, dominated the national security technology and equipping ecosystem and own, the vast majority of prime contract awards across, about $1 trillion of spend annually, which may or may not tick up with the Trump administration's budget requests into the future. But here's another stat. 87% of all defense-oriented venture capital went into Series C and beyond venture rounds, concentrating on category leaders that are explicitly intending to challenge the status quo from the defense prime contractor space and either unseat them or create additional market as new prime contractors. So this trend is not new, but attaching a number to it of 87% is actually quite interesting for all defense capital going into prime challengers. The third is that we experienced a couple of surges this year in venture capital in 2 different geographies. The first was in the United States in the springtime. So we saw a lot of really interesting high dollar rounds in the United States, followed by what I think is being called a summer surge in Europe. So we've got a number of European venture funds, sovereign and syndicate activity going into large European unicorn defense technology companies like Helsing and others. And that is likely to continue as a trend line as Europe builds its innovation economy in a way that it really hasn't since I don't know, forever. The United States still dominates that tech scene, but Europe is, I think, under pressure given the Russia-Ukraine situation and the pressure that the Trump administration is putting on NATO generally to beef up its own rearmament and reindustrialization, specifically around technology. We'll see if the kind of the long trend of European as the regulator in chief of technology can kind of loosen the shackles a bit and allow for more innovation. Here's the last trend line, or the last trend that we'll talk about. There was a shift away from commercial first or enterprise first and dual use capability into very specific defense first outfits. Think Anduril Industries, Shield AI, others that are basically defense contractors on the rise, part of that prime challenger set. Palantir, obviously from a bit of an old guard, 20 years old or so now. And we're seeing a shift back into dual use in the fields of quantum and space security. So this is something, Aaron, that you talk about quite often. Or you've spoken about in the past, this kind of 21st century space race around quantum, AI, and other technologies. But there is a shift back toward a dual use configuration for venture dollars going into new projects. In other words, it cannot only have defense applications. There's a rising kind of reversion to the trend line of requiring that there be a significant commercial and enterprise market landing place for new technologies. Any of this surprise, shock, amaze, or inspire you for commentary?
We got to talk primes, and we got to talk primes because of Boeing and Archer. And there's a real, I feel like our community and really everybody is still missing the story on what primes, 3.0 looks like in the wake of this. Dollar for dollar, the startup industry is still not even getting a fraction of what the primes get. And part of that's just because a single submarine contract is more than all of the venture money that has gone into defense in the past 5 years.
I think the number is well under 2% of total national security spend goes to non-traditional contractors like the new prime set.
So here's an interesting, for those of you that aren't familiar with what just happened with Boeing and Archer, I'm going to summarize it super fast, but Boeing sold 3 subsidiaries to Archer. It's autonomous electric aircraft maker Whisk, a drone company that they had bought called In-Situ, and then an air traffic software called SkyGrid. All those have been sold to Archer. In exchange, Boeing now owns 20% of Archer. The amount of capital and power that exists in those primes, they don't have to snatch everybody up and win every contract. They can go get 1/5 ownership in all of the, what we consider pretty big dog venture startup companies and just win no matter what. This is a genius play by Boeing that I'm shocked that the Booz Allens of the world and other folks that are experiencing difficulty in contracting, and they're just, generally their business is being constrained in the recent admin. Go dump a bunch of money into these companies that are going to win the contracts, put your muscle behind them, and you just maintain your position by a different color. There's nothing restricting them from running this play over and over and over again. Companies like Anduril are probably too big for Boeing to run that play on, but you guys have heard me say this many times. There are so many companies that the primes and the middle tier primes are going to snatch up and just own the IP, right? There's tons of good work being built, and it's very easy for them to make very attractive offers. And what do they offer? Scale. They offer scale of engagement with the government and then scale of production that is very hard to build as a startup. And this is a sure thing and a win for the operator team that wants a clean exit and wants to be able to move on to the next thing.
Well, one quick maybe comment here to add some complexity to what I'm sure was already a very complex set of deals and arrangements. There was a 2021 lawsuit filed between Boeing and Archer. This is 2021, alleging trade secret misappropriation and a range of other kind of IP related stuff.
Yeah.
Which was resolved in a settlement in 2023 that resulted in some of those investment and ownership kind of outcomes that you're describing, Simon. And I'm not saying that this was the only set of causal events leading to this ownership structure that you're describing. What I'd like to point to is this trend that sometimes it takes litigation to bust into this small set of prime contractors. Another perfect example was the litigation around, what was it, the Jedi contracts, or I forget what it was.
Cloud, it was the
cloud.
Amazon versus Microsoft.
That's right.
Jedi. Yep.
That totally. And then And then there was another one with Palantir a couple of years ago. Was it something to do with the Maven contract? I could be wrong, but like I think there's a looming dark cloud of litigation in our future as aspiring non-traditional new prime types have to wield some legal weaponry to actually create the kind of market conditions that allow them to be operative in the space. And some of that might actually end up being that you got to make some peace with the competition in the way that Archer and Boeing did.
I think this is a huge capability win, right? If Archer is making innovative platforms that have an interesting new capability, and I know DoD's big risk tolerance sphere. Can you build hundreds of these? Can I give you a contract and like trust that you can create it? If Boeing's at your back and you can maintain this culture and the quality that you've built your business on, everybody wins. But it does not mean that the primes go away. Like there is, I think, this big like fantasy that we're gonna kneecap them. Like, no, they're not. They're gonna win.
They're adapting. This week, Boeing unveiled an ultra low cost seeker, which is one of the the sensor on the seeker on the warheads is one of the most expensive components. Boeing went and said, okay, you want scalability? You want cheap scalability? I will put you together a sensor and a seeker with commercial off the shelf components, and I'll put it in every single one of our missiles.
So I'm surprised.
Are the doors going to fall off?
But like that's a great motivator for Boeing, though. I'm not surprised that Boeing is leading into this because of the difficulty they've had in recent years. But I am surprised by this trend line of like, we're going to go take down the primes. I'm like, that seems like a horrible target. If I was trying to make big returns, I'd be doing what Archer did. How do I build a really killer capability that the primes can't ignore? And they solve my scale problems. So I don't have to go through the extraordinary pain of building factories in 3 new states, right? Like it's not just one factory. One factory is hard enough. Try building 6 in 6 different states with 6 different tax structures. And like, those are laborious processes.
Yeah, that's a multi-decade government relations game in addition to just a scalability, capital intensity game.
Workforce.
All of those, workforce development, all that stuff. Let's maybe round out the conversation, Simon. I don't know if how passionately you want to talk about Capitol Hill and the goings on there, but pulling in Aaron Flint, former Senator Conrad Burns staffer and aspiring Montana delegation congressional representative. Maybe between you two, Simon and Aaron, let's riff on current state of affairs with the Congress, how it's operating, and what we can expect as a defense technology ecosystem that plays in the same arena.
Yeah, Aaron, you've got an interesting perspective here in that, obviously you've spent time on the Hill as a staffer, and I have long believed, and this is not an opinion that I think I could ever sell the American people on, the people that have worked on the Hill are naturally better suited to getting things done on the Hill. As I think, like any organization, experiencing the bottom rungs of it gives you an appreciation for like how things actually move and what it takes to develop useful relationships and play in that space. Obviously, you were there early in the 2000s. I'd be interested to know, how you think about how Congress operates today. It's a very different body than it was in the early 2000s. And I don't actually necessarily think this is like an all bad thing. The way that we do business in Congress is very different from 1999, is very different from 1969, is very different from 1939. There are like necessary changes that have to happen to our governance bodies in the wake of things like the internet and just, the changes in regional politics, the changes in American industry. But I'd be interested to know, how you think about it coming as a staffer and now someone who's trying to get back in as a potential elected, about how business gets done there and where you see opportunities to get business done there.
Yeah, no, thanks, Simon. Yeah, if I wasn't optimistic that we actually have a real opportunity to get some things done, especially right now, America's 250th birthday, I think we've got a great opportunity actually to really make sure that America remains a free republic for another 250 years. But even aside from that big picture philosophical standpoint, I really think, Senator Tim Sheehy, who's our Navy SEAL veteran, new U.S. Senator, I think he's showing that you can get back there even as a freshman senator or a freshman member of Congress And you can work with folks on the other side of the aisle to get some things done. They're doing that with wildland firefighting policy right now, where California has been such a train wreck that now California Democrats are teaming up with a Montana Republican to try to come up with some fixes. And of course, Simon, you and I both worked on the Hill, and for folks from different sides of the aisle. And I remember back in the day, and you probably saw it to a certain extent when you were there, is that, yeah, you see all the flashy, big debate topics that make the headlines on the news, but there's a ton of other stuff where we work together and get things done for people back home in Montana. That's not the partisan, rancorous stuff. And so I really think we can, work together to get some things done. But the two big topics that you guys were covering, I think tie into this. One, when you talk about technology in the defense space, to me, I tie that right back to farming and ranching here in Montana. Of course, some of the best infantrymen were farm kids or ranch kids, right? But the ag community is all focused on producer profitability. How do they, in the face of these high input costs, remain profitable and keep the family farm, the family ranch up and running? And they're doing it through technology that also makes them more efficient at managing their resources. That technology that'll say, in this part of my field, I only have to use this much water or this much fertilizer. And then in this other part of my field, I can use more, or I can use less. So it's making them far more efficient, which is helping them with their producer profitability standpoint. And then I think it also comes back to 20 years ago. I did a podcast recently with my company commander, who was my company commander in Iraq 20 years ago. And some of our most successful operations came from our everyday soldiers coming up with ideas. Because of that back and forth, we had everybody at the table. When we would do these commanders update briefs every single night, it wasn't just the officers that were at the table. It was the platoon sergeants. And then when we'd go back to our platoons, we'd sit down with our squad leaders, and then they'd sit down with their teams while we were out in our Humvees. And some of your best ideas didn't come from the big dogs. They came from the specialists and the sergeants that were out there every single day. And I see that from a defense technology standpoint too. It's just, we can't just rely on the big dogs. We've got to have everybody at the table here so that we get these tools in the hands of the soldiers and the operators. But I also think, again, getting back to Capitol Hill, I think just getting people back there who just have common sense, frankly, without getting too political, I know you guys are great about avoiding politics, but my race back here in Montana, my biggest challenge for this race right now is people look at my race and they think it's too easy because they're like, Aaron, you're a fifth generation Montanan, you're a combat veteran. You talk to Montanans every day on the radio. You've even had, folks from the other side of the aisle on your radio show with you. And then you're running against this very, very far left ideological guy who's a lobbyist from Portland, Oregon, who lobbied for the craziest of the crazy stuff. So they think it's easy. And then they get complacent. Well, complacency kills, right? And so, but I say that to say that I think right now our country is kind of at this turning point where we're going to choose common sense over crazy. And both parties have their crazies, let's be honest, right? And so I think when we elect common sense folks that are going to be able to sit at the table and get everybody at the table, I think that's how we're going to start to get things done. And also people who have some skin in the game, who know the reason for why we need more of this reform of our government so that we can get things done and we can allow this new technology to come online.
I'm not going to crack it open, but we got to get you back on in the future because I want to have a conversation about what it means to be a veteran and what that says about your desire to be in public service. Because I think we've seen good and bad of that. And I think it's an important topic, though, this idea of like, oh, it's easy. You did this, this, and that. So therefore, it's not how politics works, not how the world works. And there's more to it than just, you're a GWAT veteran. So therefore, you're the automatic in. There's work to be done. And it's good to see that you're doing the work.
I'm grateful, Aaron, that you're in the race. Again, not a political statement necessarily. I'm grateful that you're in the race for one reason, and it kind of goes into what Simon was just referencing. We have a very strong veteran presence in the Montana delegation currently, and we hope to maintain that in the future as a Montana partisan, if not a party partisan. I care a lot about that, and knowing that we have people who have sacrificed their time, their energy, careers, family, time, all that stuff to serve our country and be out on the front lines. I think it matters a lot. I think that background of service is important. Okay, we're going to wind down with a thank you to Aaron for joining us. But Simon, I'm going to ask you to defend the Fiddlehead shirt. So
Nope,
I looked up.
I'm going to defend it.
Okay,
Nope, I'm going to defend it.
Dave's going to
Okay, Dave's.
Sorry,
Dave's going to. That's right.
Dave's defense of my.
Dave is going to defend the shirt. So Aaron, I'm so sorry you're going to have to endure this, but Simon somehow never repeats a shirt, and all of his shirts are
repeats.
Okay, a couple of repeats, but most of his shirts are like punk community references, probably band shirts or tour shirts or whatever. Fiddlehead is no exception to that. Here is a quote in the critical review from the legendary publication Stereo Gum. I'm going to guess that that's a UK punk magazine. I actually don't know. And here it goes. Fiddlehead make music about death that feels fiercely, exuberantly alive. Dave, defend this band.
hard to after that quote. Well, Fiddlehead's one of my top 27 Boston-based post-hardcore bands. It was obviously formed by members of Have Heart and Basement, blending hardcore intensity with 90s emo and melodic alternative rock.
Okay,
so it's basically hardcore for people that got old.
I need 30 seconds. It is explicitly hardcore for people that got old, but unlike some of the previous bands we've talked about, when they talk about Fiddlehead singing about death, he's singing about his father's death. And so he put out a record about grief that was called Springtime and Blind, I think. I can't remember the name of the first record. But like the third song is just called USMA. His dad was a West Point grad, and it has sound clips like of his mother talking about how she met his father. Have Heart was like a really big, popular hardcore band that Pat was also the singer for. And then he stopped and he became a teacher, and he's still a school teacher, and he's a father, and he has kids, he has all these things. And he started Fiddlehead with friends to write about growing up and like having been grown up in this community. And then it got really popular. And now he has this like problem of playing shows for 3,000 kids at a time. But he has a family to raise, and he has a school teacher job. It's a very interesting. It's easily one of my favorite bands. And his mother just passed away. They just put out a new record talking about that. And there's like a great story about it where part of the band lives in England, and they just flew in and spent a weekend with Pat, and they wrote another record because they were there. So it's one of my favorite things as I age. I mean, I'm almost 40, how people deal with growing up in a youth-oriented subculture that is very obsessed with like staying young forever. And yeah.
Dave, would you agree with the Pitchfork quote that is...
It's Pitchfork, famously the meanest musical publication on the internet. Go ahead.
Fiddlehead channels the raw catharsis of early emo and post-hardcore into something expansive and deeply human. Do you agree with
I prefer my LLM version. It's hardcore for people that got old.
Okay. Well, Aaron, sorry you had to endure that. I'll just say I have no touch points with the punk scene. So it's like educational and enlightening and sometimes humorous every week. Every single week with Simon.
I don't need to defend my shirt, do I? I mean,
okay, so I've got 4 Montana Knife Company knives, right? I'm a huge fan of what Josh and team have built. I think we share investors. I think they are onto something, and I'm holding right now my combat deployment Garmin. This is back when, or sorry, not Garmin. Gerber. This is back when Gerber was actually making blades in the United States, and they've now. So I think Montana Knife Company's onto something. So defend that shirt, Aaron. Go for it.
Well,
yeah, hit it.
I'll say this because it actually ties in with a big part of why I'm running for Congress is investing in trades and trades education. If we're going to make the Montana dream affordable again, we need more electricians, more plumbers, more carpenters. You name it. Missoula. I mean, everybody thinks MKC has just been this massively successful company forever. He really got his start in 2020. I went to the Black Rifle Coffee Company store there in Missoula, was talking with Josh. He was showing me their manufacturing floor. They've now got 120 employees at this new facility in Missoula. They hired a kid who was a senior in high school back in 2020. That kid's now making 6 figures, no college degree, no student loan debt. And I love that story because whether we're talking timber industry and fixing our forests, whether we're talking defense technology and opportunities for our veterans coming home or retiring out of the military, or we're talking about manufacturing. These are the types of jobs that not only kids get excited about here in Montana, but they're the type of high wage job opportunities that'll be able to keep kids here in Montana and be able to raise their families here. Hopefully get out and get on the water this summer as well with a pontoon boat or something like that as well.
I could be wrong, but I think Josh Smith, the founder and CEO over at Montana Knife Company, he's not a young guy. He's probably my age-ish, 40s. He's in his 40s. Is that true?
I think he's low 40s or upper 30s. I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't think he's older than me. I'm 43. So this is what I love about that story. He's a Montana kid. He was an entrepreneur from the get-go. Like, I think he told his mom when he was in his early teens, I'm going to make the next great knife company in America. I think he went out right then. So this is years and years and years ago, way before the 2020 kind of like founding myth around the Montana Knife Company. I think he like registered that name and got trademarks lined up when he was a teenager, like 20 or 30 years ago. That might be apocryphal. I might not be representing Josh, you correctly. So if you want to reach back out to me and tell me I'm wrong, but I love it. It's entrepreneurial. It is high quality. It contributes to our Montana economy. I mean, it's a great thing. Not to get too Montana on this podcast, but really psyched about that. And Aaron, thanks for
never get too Montana, Garrett.
I guess that's true. Well, thanks, Aaron, for joining us, taking time out of what I'm sure is a super busy campaign as you barrel toward the general later this year. Really enjoyed it. Thanks, Simon, for repping yet another meaningful cast in the expansive punk universe, and Dave for keeping it real. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you, guys.